We're coming dangerously close to the final conclusion of this model resin kit build, the epic CHAPPiE MOOSE. We're doing the major assembly and a whole mess of decals, so let's go. It's been a while since I updated you guys, and where I left off, I pretty much finished all of the painting. I even did a tiny bit of assembling, but in this episode we're going to go over pretty much all of the major assemblies. This one's probably going to be pretty light on the commentary because it is pretty straightforward. I'm basically just assembling all the main components of the kit. Again, there are no real step-by-step instructions, and you're kind of left up to your own to figure it out, but I decided it was going to be a lot easier if I just do things in sub-assemblies before putting everything together. There is a bit of a sequence to allow the parts to be more easily put together without frustrations, but of course they don't really tell you that, so you're kind of left up to form your own game plan. While the glue is drying, you're gonna see me jumping from larger piece to larger piece and just assembling all the tiny little things that go on each of the larger pieces. Another cool part of this kit are the clear parts, and those are the lenses for the lights and also the optics. This kit has so many different pieces and materials, and I think that it just combines to this overall really cool look that they could have made these parts out of just regular opaque plastic or resin, but the fact that they gave you these little details, everything just adds up and it makes it look a lot cooler. Because a lot of these pieces are similar but not identical, I did have to refer to the instructions a bunch and definitely make sure I was gluing down these parts in the right places because it's pretty easy to mix things up here. These handles didn't quite fit exactly perfectly aligned and they're a little bit flexible, so I had to glue down one piece at a time and then kind of bend it into the right shape. This kit did take me a lot longer to assemble because there are just so many tiny little details and parts that it took a very long time to stick all of the things onto the main larger pieces. These were kind of the first detail pieces I was putting on the larger structures, and I was really happy with the contrast of the gold pieces against the more matte camouflage. With each new part that I was assembling and putting on, I just thought it was looking cooler and cooler, and I was really excited to see how it would all look when it was finished. Of course, I had an idea of how it would look in my mind, but until you actually see it and feel it in your hands, you don't really know what it's going to look like. But as I was seeing it, I was just pretty blown away with the final result. Some of the parts were definitely giving me more trouble than others. I swear I had to re-glue this part about 3 or 4 times, but I finally got it. It's just a very delicate piece. For some of the parts I still had to modify them. This part was not going into the pins on the pincher part, so I just decided to drill this hole out a little bit bigger to make room for it. And of course it fit very tightly, and I ended up actually breaking off this pin. This was pretty disappointing to realize what I had just done, although I did find a way to fix it by just drilling another hole for that pin now to go into the other arm piece. Here's another part I did have to modify because this was a very tight fit and I was afraid I was going to end up breaking something, and I really didn't want to do that. This cannon arm is very heavy and it does need that little shelf, so I didn't want to cut away so much that it didn't have that contact point or the leverage anymore, so this was a delicate operation, but I did do it. Another concern I have was these feet fit very tightly into the base, and I was very afraid I was going to end up snapping them even though they do have a metal armature. There are 4 nuts on the bottom of these feet, and I actually had to use one of them to tighten down and actually close the gap between the foot and the base. I should have actually drilled those holes out a little bit more and test fitted them, but I wasn't sure of it, so I just went with it, and thankfully nothing broke. These side pods were a little tricky to put on, and I decided in the end maybe I'll wait till after I put the main hull on before I put those on. The feet on this model are extremely complex with a ton of different tiny little parts. I really think each foot has about 15 little parts that all make up the final foot assembly. They have different articulated toes, and each one has like a different set of pistons, and there's springs and all kinds of little parts. Major kudos to the designers that came up with this crazy complicated mess. I can only imagine what this was like trying to rig it in 3D for the movie. That must have been a nightmare. Some of the parts on the feet were too small for me to place with my fingers, so I had to resort to using tweezers. Also, there were a few of these pistons that were really hard to place because they were up underneath the foot, and it would make sense if you put them on before you set the model down, but then you had to place where the toes went on the base, so you're kind of stuck in this catch-22. So I figured having the feet all the way down on the base first and then assembling all the toe pieces around it was the way to go in the end. I would have liked to have the side toes be flush with the base, but the way they molded everything, that wasn't really possible. I could have had them floating parallel and hovering over the base, but I figured having the ends of the toes touching was better than just having them hovering. The majority of the smaller pieces actually are only on the feet and toe portion, so after I was finished with that, I could finally move on to assembling the larger structures. At this point, I couldn't believe how fast the assembly was going, because once you start putting on the major structures, it all comes together pretty fast. At this point, things are looking incredible, but we still have a long way to go. Unfortunately, the tape on these base pieces did not do a good job at having a hard edge for the black paint. I could get a hard edge on the bottom or the top, but not both at the same time, and I didn't want to keep going back and forth trying to do that over and over, so I decided to just throw down some vinyl and get a clean edge on both sides without any problems. The vinyl is also much more reflective and metallic, so this just gives another element to all the other ones that are already on the model. This kit comes with a massive decal sheet, and this was kind of my first time working with water slide decals. Of course, I made the noob mistake of thinking I needed to cut out the decals exactly around them, but later on I figured out they're already cut out, you just need to slide them off of the backing paper. I was actually debating before if I I should even apply decals to the model because there's already so much going on, and I didn't want the decals to just be so much overblown that it kind of took away from the other elements of the kit. So I told myself I just put a few on, and after I put 1 or 2 on, I thought it looked so much cooler than it already did, so I just went gung-ho on it and I just put a massive amount of decals on this model. They completely add a sense of scale and give it so much more realism. Before it looked kind of more like a model and a toy, but once you start putting on these decals that are very tiny and they have tons of detail, it just makes the model look so much more realistic in my opinion. Most of the decals are just informational, and there's something about that military aesthetic that I just really enjoy. I think it looks so cool. The dark gray camo makes the white elements just pop so much, and I think the stenciled lettering looks so cool. I was really glad I went overboard with all of the decals that I put on. Given the fact that I had never worked with these kind of decals before, I was very surprised that I only destroyed one of them out of the, I don't know how many I put on, probably 50 or 60. These ones that surrounded the pods were very large and they wrapped around the whole entire way, and I thought I was going to mess up on them, but I just took my time and it actually came out really well. Even though this model is very distinctive, I decided to give it my own personalized touch and throw on my own HTLL personalized logo stickers. Of course, in the gold vinyl, so you get that reflectivity, and even though these are kind of hidden by the hole, you can still see them peeking out, and I think it looks really cool. I was really hoping that this would be the last episode in the series where I could finally unveil the completed model, but alas, I just ran out of time because there are so many more details on this model that I have yet to show you. I want to thank you guys so much for watching all the way to the end. I really appreciate it. In the next episode, I will be unveiling the final completed build, and I'm really excited to show it to you guys, and I hope you stay tuned. Thanks so much for watching, and I will see you in the next one.